The music pulsed low and slow, heavy bass rolling through the private VIP lounge like a heartbeat. Neon lights slid across polished glass, leather couches, expensive liquor, and barely there dresses. Ji-hoon Kang sat at the center of it all, one arm draped lazily over the back of the couch, a quiet king watching his kingdom move around him. A woman straddled his lap, her thighs warm through the thin fabric of her dress. Her perfume was sweet, intoxicating. She leaned in close, lips brushing his ear as she swayed to the rhythm. "You look like a man who gets whatever he wants," she whispered. Ji-hoon's jaw was sharp, perfectly sculpted under the shifting lights. A faint scar traced near his temple, only adding to the danger in his beauty. The collar of his black shirt was slightly open, revealing the dark edge of a tattoo that curled down his chest. Ink that hinted at violence, loyalty, and bloodlines that ran deeper than money. His eyes were calm, cold, unreadable. He didn't answer her with words. His hand tightened briefly at her waist. That was enough. Around them, men in dark suits stood like statues along the walls. His guards, his soldiers, his shadows. He was powerful. Everyone in the club knew it. Everyone felt it. The woman kissed along his jaw, then his lips. He let her. Somewhere, far away in the back of his mind, a memory stirred. Of a woman who once waited for him at home, who once believed his lips belonged only to her. He pushed the thought away. Ara was no longer his wife. The glass door to the VIP lounge slid open. One of his men leaned in. "Boss," he said respectfully. "The others have arrived. The meeting is ready." Ji-hoon's gaze lifted slowly. The woman pouted. "Already? You said you'd be right back with me." He gently lifted her off his lap and rose to his feet. Standing, his presence was even more overwhelming. Tall, broad-shouldered, controlled. Wealth clung to him in the subtle details. The tailored suit, the watch on his wrist, the quiet authority in the way the room seemed to pause for him. "I will be," he said calmly. "Wait." She smiled like she'd just been promised a reward. He turned and walked through the glass hallway into the private meeting room without another glance. Inside, the air shifted instantly. 3 men sat at the table, business partners on paper, rivals underneath. The room smelled of cigars and quiet tension. Everyone stood the moment Ji-hoon entered. He took his seat at the head of the table. The meeting began. Numbers, ports, routes, territories, smiles that meant nothing, threats hidden in polite language. Each man spoke carefully, choosing every word like it might be his last. Ji-hoon listened more than he talked. Then, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Once. He ignored it. The meeting continued. His phone vibrated again. Annoyed, he slipped a hand into his jacket, intending to shut it off. His thumb paused. Unknown, caller, hospital ID. A slight crease formed between his brows. Hospital? His first thought was his mother. He rose slowly from his chair. "Hold," he said. The room froze in shock as he walked out mid-negotiation. Back in the lounge, the music still throbbed. The woman rose eagerly when she saw him. "You missed me already?" she teased. He didn't look at her. He answered the phone. "This is Seoul Central Hospital," a woman's voice said urgently. "Are you Ji-hoon Kang?" "Yes. There is a patient here who listed you as her emergency contact." His chest tightened. "Who?" he asked. A brief pause. "Ara Kang." The name hit him like ice water. The club noise dulled. His heartbeat suddenly felt too loud. "What happened?" he asked. "She collapsed during labor. She's losing blood rapidly. Her condition is critical." "Labor?" His breath caught sharply. "She's pregnant?" he demanded. "Yes, sir. Full term. But there's a complication. Her blood type is extremely rare. You are the only donor match we have on record. His hand went numb around the phone. If you don't come immediately, the nurse continued, voice shaking, we may lose both the mother and the baby. For 2 seconds, Ji-hoon Kang, the man who never hesitated, could not speak. Then his voice came out low. I'm coming. The call ended. The woman touched his arm. What's wrong? He looked at her hand like it belonged to a stranger. Slowly, he removed it and walked away. His men followed as he stormed out of the club, abandoning the music, the meeting, the woman, the entire world that had once defined him. Behind him, the party went on. But somewhere else, under blinding white lights and the scream of machines, the woman he once loved was lying between life and death, carrying a child he never knew existed. If your heart just skipped at that reveal, don't go anywhere. Like this video, subscribe right now, and tell us in the comments, should a man like him even be allowed back into her life? Ji-hoon didn't know it yet, but the next few hours were about to destroy the man he used to be. The city tore past the windows in streaks of light as Ji-hoon's convoy tore through traffic. Cars swerved, horns blared. Red lights were treated like suggestions. His driver's hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles white. Ji-hoon stared straight ahead, phone clenched in his fist. Pregnant. The word echoed again and again in his head like an accusation. Ara had been carrying his child when she left. 8 months ago, she had stood in front of him with shaking hands and a quiet voice, and said she was done. He had let her walk out as if she meant nothing, and all that time, she had been carrying his baby alone. His jaw clenched so hard it ached. The hospital came into view, bright, white, merciless. The moment the car stopped, Ji-hoon pushed the door open himself. Nurses, startled as he burst through the entrance, his presence cutting through the air like a blade. Ara Kang, he said. Where is she? They didn't ask questions. They saw the panic behind the calm and moved at once. This way, sir. They rushed him down long, sterile corridors. The beeping of machines grew louder with every step. The smell of antiseptic burned his lungs. Through a glass window, he saw her. Ara lay pale on the bed, dark hair plastered to her damp forehead. Tubes ran into her arms. Monitors flashed erratic lines above her. For a moment, the world tilted. She looked smaller than he remembered. Fragile, human. A doctor intercepted him. You're the donor? Yes. You understand the risks? Yes. You could lose consciousness. Your blood pressure could crash. I don't care. The doctor studied his face for a split second, then nodded. Follow me. They wasted no time. Needles, cold antiseptic. The sharp sting as the needle slid into his vein. Warmth rushed through the tube. Across the hall, Ara's heart rate spiked dangerously. Her pressure is dropping, a nurse shouted. She's going into shock. Ji-hoon clenched his jaw, eyes fixed on the ceiling as his blood flowed out of him and into her. He had taken so much from her when she was his wife. Time, trust, safety. He would give her this, all of it. His vision blurred. Sir, a nurse warned, you need to slow your breathing. Keep going, he said hoarsely. Don't stop. Through the haze, he heard hurried footsteps. We're taking her into surgery now. The gurney rushed past the doorway. Ara's arm slipped out from under the sheets for a second. Her fingers were cold and limp. Ji-hoon's chest tightened so violently it hurt. Then the doors slammed shut. Time stretched into torture. Minutes crawled. His head spun. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. Almost done, someone said. He barely heard it. Then the room went dark. Ara floated between dreams and pain. Voices echoed above her. Lights burned through her closed eyelids. The agony in her body came in waves so strong she thought she might break apart from the inside. Then suddenly, a cry. Small, weak, but alive. Her heart lurched. "She's alive," someone said. "The baby's alive." Tears slipped from the corners of Ara's closed eyes. Ji-hoon woke to the sound of beeping. His limbs felt heavy. His head throbbed. For a second, he didn't remember where he was. Then the door flew open. "A healthy baby girl," the doctor said briskly. "Mother stabilized just in time." Ji-hoon sucked in a shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "She survived?" "Yes." His chest loosened, just a little. He forced himself upright despite the nurse's protest. "Let me see her." They wheeled him down the hall. Ara was waking when he entered her room. Her lashes fluttered, her eyes opened, and met his. For a moment, they just stared at each other like strangers meeting in the aftermath of a disaster. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. His voice came out rough. "You collapsed. You needed blood." Her brows knit in confusion. "I gave it," he added. Realization crept slowly across her face. Her lips parted, her eyes shimmered. Then the nurse gently placed the bundled baby into her arms. Ara broke. Tears slid down her temples and into her hair as she stared at the tiny face. The baby let out a faint, tired cry. "My baby," she whispered. Ji-hoon stood frozen beside the bed. "That's mine?" he asked quietly. Ara didn't look at him, but she nodded once. The room felt too small for what he was feeling. He had a daughter, a living piece of him. He reached out with trembling hands and touched the baby's tiny fingers. She wrapped her hand weakly around his finger. Something inside his chest shattered. At that exact moment, his phone began to vibrate. Once, twice, 3 times. Emergency calls. His men. His world demanding him back. He stared at the screen. Then, slowly, deliberately, he placed the phone face down on the table. Ara saw it. Her breath caught. "You never used to do that," she said softly. He didn't answer. For the first time in his life, he didn't know how to explain himself. The night deepened. The hospital grew quieter. Ara slept. The baby slept on her chest, rising and falling with fragile breaths. Ji-hoon stayed. His men waited outside, stunned by his silence. Near dawn, Ara woke again. "You should go," she said without looking at him. "Your world doesn't stop because of me." He moved closer to the bed. "My world stopped when I saw you on that table," he said. She closed her eyes. "You didn't care when I was hurting before." "That was the worst mistake of my life." She finally looked at him. "You cheated on me," she said quietly. "You abandoned me. You let me walk away while carrying your child alone. What do you expect from me now?" His throat tightened. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Then why are you here?" He looked down at the sleeping baby. "Because I finally understand what I destroyed." Silence filled the room. Then she whispered the words that cut him deeper than any blade ever could. "If you had chosen me like this before, I would never have left." His eyes burned. For the first time, the feared Ji-hoon Kang bowed his head. "I was afraid," he confessed. "Afraid that I would ruin you the way I ruin everything. So I pushed you away first. I thought I was saving you." Ara's voice trembled. "You were killing me." He closed his eyes. "I know." Outside the hospital, unseen eyes were already watching. News was spreading. The king of the underworld had revealed a weakness, and enemies were beginning to move. Rain began to fall sometime in the early morning, thin streaks running down the hospital windows like the sky was trying to wash the night away. Ji-hoon stood just outside Ara's room, back against the wall, eyes closed. The fluorescent light above him hummed softly. He could still feel the weight of his daughter's tiny fingers around his. He never knew his hands could hold something that gently. One of his men cleared his throat quietly down the hall. "Boss?" Ji-hoon opened his eyes. Min-jae, his closest lieutenant, looked more tense than usual. His suit was wrinkled. His hair was damp from the rain. "Talk," Ji-hoon said. Min-jae glanced nervously toward the room where Ara lay. "Word is spreading. The men from last night realized you walked out mid-deal. They're furious. Some say you disrespected them. Others think you're weak. I don't care what they think," Ji-hoon replied. "You might care what they do," Min-jae said quietly. "We intercepted chatter. They know you're here. Worse, some of them know why." There was a beat of silence. Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. "Who talked?" "Does it matter?" Min-jae said. "What matters is this place is not safe. You, her, the baby, this is a gift to your enemies. If they want to hurt you, this is perfect." Ji-hoon glanced through the small window in the door. Ara lay on her side, one arm curled protectively around the baby's bassinet beside the bed. She looked exhausted, but every time the baby made even the faintest sound, Ara's eyes opened. "I'm not leaving them," he said. "Boss?" "I said I'm not leaving." Min-jae swallowed. "At least let us move you all to a safer location. One we control. Not a public hospital with glass doors and a security guard who looks like he's about to retire." Ji-hoon shook his head. "She's barely out of surgery. Moving her now is more dangerous than waiting." Min-jae hesitated, then lowered his voice. "The men from last night already lost one of their own in a previous conflict with us. If they come here, they won't bring lawyers. They'll bring guns." Ji-hoon's eyes hardened. "Then we'll be ready." He pushed off the wall and stepped back into the room. Ara watched him as he came in. She'd been pretending to sleep, but the truth was, she hadn't really slept at all. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw glimpses of the woman she used to be, standing in front of a mirror, adjusting her makeup, hoping he'd notice her that night. Most nights, he never came home. Now, he was here. And she didn't know what to do with that. "You should change those clothes," she said quietly. "You still look like you walked out of a club." He glanced down at his wrinkled suit, the faint shadow of someone's lipstick at his collar. He looked out of place here, like a sin dropped into something sacred. "I didn't have time," he said. "You had time for them," she replied softly. The words weren't loud, but they landed heavily. His shoulders tensed. Ara adjusted the blanket around the baby's tiny form. The little girl's chest rose and fell in shallow, steady breaths. A hospital bracelet circled her delicate wrist, far too big. "I didn't know," he said. Ara's eyes remained on the baby. "That I was pregnant?" "Yes." She let out a bitter breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "You never asked. How would you know?" He didn't have an answer. "When I left," she continued, voice low, "I waited, for days, for you to call, to ask where I was, to ask if I was okay, to ask anything." His throat tightened. "You didn't." Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the edge of the blanket. "So, I decided my child would never have to grow up watching me beg for someone who didn't even notice I was gone." He moved closer to the bed. "Ara." "Don't," she said. He fell silent. The baby made a small sound, her mouth opening in a tiny yawn. Ara's features softened instantly. She brushed a knuckle over the baby's cheek. "I was so scared," she whispered. "Every checkup, every pain, every night the cramps grew worse. I thought, if something happens to me, no one will even know she exists." His hand curled into a fist. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. even once, even in a message. Because I didn't trust you, she said, finally looking up at him. Because I thought if you knew, you'd try to own her the way you own everything else. Like she was another property, another territory, another thing under your control. There was no accusation in her tone, just truth. He took a slow breath. You thought I'd be a bad father. You were a bad husband, she replied. I didn't want my child to have to survive that version of you. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was full of years, choices, regrets. Can I hold her? He asked, voice rough. Ara hesitated, then she nodded once. Sit down. He sat carefully at the edge of the bed. Ara lifted the baby and gently placed her into his arms. The world narrowed. She was so light, so impossibly small. He had held guns, knives, stacks of money, signed contracts that ruined lives, ordered men to disappear. Nothing had ever made his hands feel clumsy before. Now they shook. The baby's face scrunched slightly as she shifted against his chest, then relaxed again. Her tiny fingers opened and closed on nothing. Ji-hoon swallowed hard. What will you name her? He asked. Ara watched him. I hadn't decided, she admitted. I told myself I'd know when I saw her, but when they brought her out, I didn't think about names. I was just grateful she was breathing. He looked down at his daughter, at the soft dark hair on her head, at the faint crease between her brows that looked undeniably like his. You should choose, he said quietly. You protected her when I didn't even know she existed. Ara studied him for a long moment. Ha-un, she said finally. It means grace. Something I never got from you, but she deserves it. His lips tightened. He repeated it under his breath. Ha-un, like he was promising the name to himself. A shadow appeared in the doorway. Min-jae knocked lightly once, then stepped in. His gaze flickered to the baby, then to Ara. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said carefully, but we have a situation. Ara stiffened. What situation? She asked. Ji-hoon's eyes didn't leave his lieutenant. Outside. He carefully handed Ha-un back to Ara, making sure the blanket was secure, then followed Min-jae into the hallway. What is it? He demanded. Min-jae's voice dropped. We spotted 2 of their men across the street. They're not subtle. They're watching the entrance, counting everyone who goes in and out. What do they know? At minimum, they know you're here, vulnerable. At worst, they know about the child. A sharp, controlled anger twisted in Ji-hoon's gut. If they touch this building, they might not need to, Min-jae cut in. If you stay, they win. They force you to protect 2 civilians in a wide-open space. If you leave, they follow you and hit when it suits them. Either way, they'll turn this into a message. Ji-hoon stared at the floor for a long moment. What are my options? He asked. Option 1, Min-jae said. We move Ara and the baby to one of our secure locations. It's risky, but at least we control the environment. Too soon after surgery, Ji-hoon muttered. Option 2, Min-jae continued. We flood this place with our men, take over security, turn the hospital into a fortress for as long as you're here. That puts innocent people at risk. Option 3, Min-jae hesitated. Say it, Ji-hoon ordered. You leave. Let us handle whatever comes. The less they see you care, the less they'll push. The words settled like poison between them. Ji-hoon exhaled slowly. If I walk out, they might come after her just to prove a point. They might come after her precisely because you're finally showing you care? Min-jae shot back. You changed the rules the moment you answered that phone. He didn't mean it as an accusation, but that's how it landed. Ji-hoon looked through the glass again. Ara was humming softly, rocking Ha-un in her arms. She had dark circles under her eyes, and stitches beneath her gown. But some kind of fragile peace had settled over her features as she looked down at their child. He pressed his palm flat against the cool glass. "This is the first time in my life I have something I'm afraid to lose," he said quietly. Min-jae watched him. "Then you already know what they'll use against you." A long, heavy pause. Then Ji-hoon straightened. "Call everyone," he said. "No guns inside the building. We secure the entrances, exits, the parking lot. No one suspicious gets near the maternity floor. We protect them quietly. No panic, no noise." Min-jae nodded. "And you?" "I stay," Ji-hoon said. "If they want a message, I'll give them one. But they're not touching my family." The word slipped out before he could pull it back. Family. It felt strange on his tongue. Strange and right. Min-jae's gaze softened for the first time that day. Understood. As he moved away to give the orders, Ji-hoon remained at the window, watching Ara hold Ha-eun like she was the most fragile, precious thing in the world. He had built an empire out of fear, but for the first time, he wondered if he was willing to let it all burn. Inside the room, Ara glanced at the window, sensing eyes on her. She couldn't hear what was being said outside, but she could feel it. Danger, movement. The shift in the air that always came before something bad happened when she still lived in his house. She looked down at Ha-eun, sleeping peacefully against her. "I don't care what he does," she whispered. "This time, I will choose you first, even if he doesn't." But despite the hardness in her voice, her gaze drifted once more to the glass, to the faint outline of Ji-hoon's figure on the other side. And she hated that some part of her still wanted to believe him. Still wanted to hope he'd finally choose them back. This time, not with words, but with everything. The first scream echoed through the maternity ward just before noon. It wasn't Ara's. It was a nurse's. Ji-hoon was on his feet before the sound fully registered, instinct tearing through him faster than thought. His men moved instantly, flooding the corridor with silent precision. The air shifted. Fear became visible. "East stairwell," Min-jae's voice came through his earpiece. 2 armed men tried to force their way past security. We contained them, but it wasn't a test. It was a probe. A probe. Ji-hoon's eyes flicked to Ara's door. They were mapping his reactions, measuring his limits. Ara felt it too. She was sitting up in bed now, clutching Ha-eun to her chest, eyes wide with a terror she recognized all too well. The kind of terror that came when his world collided with hers. "They're here, aren't they?" she asked quietly. Ji-hoon stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Not yet, and they won't reach you." Her grip tightened around the baby. "You don't get to promise that." "I do," he said firmly, "because I'll die before I let them touch you." "That's the problem," she shot back. "You always speak in blood." He froze. The silence stretched. Finally, she whispered, "I don't want Ha-eun growing up thinking violence is proof of love." His chest tightened like a fist had closed around his heart. Before he could answer, Min-jae burst in, face tight. "Boss, they're escalating. More men across the street. Too many for intimidation. They're preparing to hit the building." Ara's breath hitched. Ji-hoon's mind sharpened into something cold and lethal. "Evacuate this floor quietly. Now. No sirens, no panic." "The doctors won't release her," Min-jae warned. "She's still unstable." Ji-hoon turned to Ara. "If I move you right now, you could hemorrhage." "If you don't," she said softly, "they'll kill us both." The truth hung between them, raw and undeniable. He looked at Ha-eun, then back at Ara, then at Min-jae. And for the first time since he built his empire, Ji-hoon Kang made a decision that had nothing to do with power, territory, or dominance. "Call the authorities," he said. Min-jae stared. "Boss, you know what that means." "Yes." "You'll be exposed." "Yes." "Your accounts, your roots, every enemy you've ever buried?" "I know." Ara's eyes locked onto his. "What are you saying?" He stepped closer to the bed. "I'm ending this," he said. "All of it." Min-jae shook his head slowly. "If you turn yourself in, the enemy won't need to attack this hospital. The war will explode everywhere at once. You'll lose everything." Ji-hoon looked down at his daughter's tiny face. "Then it's already worth it." Ara's voice cracked. "You can't just erase your life overnight." "I can," he said quietly, "because this is the first life that ever made sense." Tears blurred her vision. "You think this fixes what you did?" "No," he said honestly, "but it stops Ha-eun from paying for it." Outside, tires screeched, shouting erupted. The threat was no longer theoretical. Ji-hoon took Min-jae aside. "Get an extraction team ready for Ara and the baby. Unmarked route, no weapons drawn. If anything happens to them..." His voice faltered for the first time ever. Min-jae straightened. "They'll be safe." Ji-hoon returned to Ara's bedside. "They're going to move you," he said. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere clean." Her eyes searched his face. "And you?" "I won't be with you for a while." "For how long?" He hesitated, then told her the truth. "I don't know." Her lower lip trembled. "Is this another disappearance?" "No," he said softly. "This time, it's a choice." The building shook with the distant boom of something crashing into the lower floors. People screamed. Ji-hoon cupped Ara's face gently. "Listen to me. Every lie I ever told you, every betrayal, every absence, I can't erase any of that. But I can stop running now. I can give our daughter something I never had. A father who stays." Tears slid freely down Ara's face. "You already stayed last night." He nodded. "Now I have to stay in a different way." Min-jae returned with a nod. "Route is clear, for now." Nurses rushed in with a wheelchair. Ara was carefully transferred, Ha-eun shielded in her arms. Ji-hoon walked beside them every step of the way, his body angled like a shield. The hallways were chaos. Patients crying, staff shouting, guards sprinting. They reached the service elevator. The doors slid open. Ara looked up at him one last time before they separated. "You destroyed me once," she whispered. "Don't do it again by dying." He pressed his forehead to hers for a brief, desperate second. "I won't," he promised. "I'll come back different." The doors closed, and she was gone. Ji-hoon stood alone in the ruined hallway as the echoes of footsteps faded. Then he straightened and walked toward the fire. 3 hours later, every major law enforcement unit in the city was in motion. Anonymous tip-offs, leaked documents, hidden accounts exposed, routes mapped, names unburied, the underworld convulsed. And at the center of it all was one man walking calmly into a federal building, hands empty, back straight, eyes steady. "I'm here to make a deal," Ji-hoon Kang said. The cell was colder than he expected. Not physically, emotionally. No music, no lights, no power, just silence. For the first time since he was a teenager, no one waited for his orders. No one feared his name. He sat on the narrow bed and finally allowed himself to fall apart. He pressed his face into his hands and cried, not for his empire, not for his money, but for the years he stole from a woman who loved him. For the nights Ara slept alone. For the child who might grow up thinking he abandoned her the same way he abandoned her mother. Weeks passed, then months. His cooperation reshaped the criminal world. Men vanished into prisons, Networks collapsed. Rivals fled or turned on each other. The war burned itself out. And in a quiet coastal town far from Seoul, Ara learned to breathe again. Ha-un grew stronger. Her cries became laughs. Her tiny hands learned to grip the edge of her crib. At night, Ara would sit by the window and wonder if he was still alive. She hated herself for wondering. One afternoon, 2 years later, Ara received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sentence written in careful, restrained handwriting. I kept my promise. Her hands shook. Tears fell onto the paper before she even realized she was crying. The sea was calm that morning. Soft waves rolled toward the shore in slow, gentle rhythms, like the world had finally decided to breathe again. The small coastal cafe sat just steps from the sand, its wide windows open to the salt air. Inside, the scent of fresh bread and warm tea filled the quiet space. Ara wiped the counter slowly, watching her daughter draw shaky circles on a piece of paper near the window. Ha-un was 3 now. Her hair had grown thick and dark. Her cheeks were round with health. Every laugh she gave felt like a miracle Ara still hadn't fully processed. Life had become quieter, smaller, safer, and still. Some nights, the ghosts returned. The door to the cafe opened. A bell chimed softly. Ara didn't look up at first. She heard footsteps, slow, careful, uncertain. Mommy, Ha-un said suddenly, lifting her head. That man is crying? Ara's heart stuttered. She looked up, and the world shifted. Ji-hoon Kang stood just inside the doorway. Thinner, palest. The sharp edges of power had been filed down by time and consequence. His hair was shorter now. His eyes no longer carried the weight of command, but they carried something far heavier. Fear, hope, regret, love. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then Ha-un slipped off her chair and toddled toward him. You're crying? She said seriously, tilting her head. Ji-hoon dropped to his knees. His breath broke apart as her tiny hands touched his face. I'm okay, he whispered. She studied him like a puzzle. Are you my daddy? The word destroyed him. Yes, he choked. If you'll let me be. She stared at him for a long second. Then she wrapped her arms around his neck. Ji-hoon collapsed. The sound that tore out of his chest wasn't a sob. It was something deeper, something that had waited years to be released. Ara stood frozen behind the counter, one hand braced against the wood to keep from falling. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. Anger, accusation, shouting. None of it came. Only tears. He finally looked up at her. I kept my promise, he said quietly. She stepped forward slowly. You disappeared. I was where I needed to be, he replied, to become someone who could stand in front of you without dragging death behind him. Silence stretched between them. Ha-un wiggled free and took Ara's hand. Mommy, she said proudly. This is Daddy. He said so. Ara knelt beside her daughter. Yes, she whispered. I know. She rose again and looked Ji-hoon in the eyes. Why did you really come back? She asked. Don't give me a pretty answer. He swallowed. Because I learned how empty power is when it has no one to come home to. And the cheating? She asked quietly. The lies? The nights I cried alone while you gave another woman what was supposed to be mine? His voice shook. I can't undo them. I can only promise they will never happen again. Not because I fear losing you, but because I finally learned what loyalty means. She searched his face. Say it, she told him. He sank to his knees in front of her. I was wrong, he said, in every way, and I am sorry in every way. The sea whispered outside. Ha-un tugged on Ara's sleeve. Mommy, she said softly. Daddy is sad. Ara closed her eyes. When she opened them, the war inside her had quieted. "Get up," she told him. He obeyed. "This is not forgiveness," she said. "This is the beginning of something new. And if you betray it, you won't lose an empire this time. You'll lose us." He nodded. "I understand." Years passed, not in rush, not in fire, but in mornings, in shared meals, in scraped knees and bedtime stories. Ji-hoon learned how to pack lunches, how to braid clumsy hair, how to sleep without fear of ambush. He learned how to argue without threats, how to love without destruction. Ara learned how to breathe beside him again, not in fear, not in waiting, but in trust. One evening, as Ha-eun slept between them on the couch with a book on her chest, Ara finally spoke the words that had lived in her throat for years. "I loved you even when I hated you," she said quietly. Ji-hoon exhaled. "I didn't deserve that love." "You don't deserve what we have now either," she replied. "But we're choosing you anyway." He turned to her, eyes wet. "This time," she added, "we choose each other." Years later, Ha-eun stood on a school stage under warm lights, nervously gripping a microphone. "Thank you for coming," she said shyly. "This song is for my parents." In the audience, Ji-hoon squeezed Ara's hand. "I used to be very scared," Ha-eun continued. "But my daddy taught me that scary people can change if they learn to stay." The room filled with applause. Ji-hoon bowed his head, overwhelmed. Ara leaned in and whispered, "You stayed." "Yes," he said. "Forever this time." That night, as the ocean stretched endlessly before them once again, Ara rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The power? The fear?" He looked out at the dark water. "No," he said calmly, "because I traded it for something that doesn't vanish in the morning." She smiled faintly. "What?" "You," he said, "and her." The waves rolled in, soft, steady, faithful. And for the first time in his life, Ji-hoon Kang had built a world that did not require blood to hold it together. It only required love. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more powerful stories about love, loss, and redemption. And in the comments, tell us the truth. Did you forgive him too?